Well, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission. Before we begin, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. First, if you're wishing to speak to the commission today regarding any of the items on our agenda, we do require that you complete one of these forms. They're right out front at the desk, right in front, and just submit it to our friends here at the dais, and they will be able to make sure we call your name when it's time for you to have the opportunity to speak. We do ask that you please silence your cell phones. We also ask that if you're here with a large group of neighbors, that you consider appointing someone to speak on behalf of the entire neighborhood. I can assure you that when we hear from one neighbor, we will understand that without needing to hear it repeatedly from other neighbors. So we do reserve the right to limit any repetitious comments. And most importantly of all, we follow the golden rule. Please respect your neighbors here, respect the commission, and respect the process. So with that being said, let's move forward with the receipt of the minutes. Oh, before I do that, I also want to give a special welcome to our new Ward 3 Planning Commissioner, Jeremy Meeks. So thank you so much for being here. Welcome. And so let's move forward with receipt of the minutes.
June 22nd Planning Commission meeting.
Commissioner Clare has moved that we receive the minutes from the June 22nd, 2023 meeting.
Second.
That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. Who are we missing? Oh. Oh, he abstained. And the motion passes. We're now in line for continuance requests. We'll begin with uncontested requests.
We have several items for uncontested requests. We have item B25, C7564, a request to defer to July 27th. Item B26, C7566, defer to August 10th. Item B27, C7511, defer to October 12th. Item B28, PC10864, deferred to October 12th. Item B29, Spud 1509, deferred to July 27th. Item B30, Spud 1523, deferred to July 27th. And item B31, PC10870, has been withdrawn.
Thank you. Is there anyone here wishing to be heard on any of those items? Items 25 through 31. Seeing none, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to grant the uncontested continuance requests as read.
Commissioner Clare has moved to grant the uncontested continuance requests as read.
Second.
That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Let's see if we can get our technology up. Appreciate your patience with us. There we go. There we go. We've got it working. So again, the motion is to grant the uncontested continuance requests as read. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're now in line for new requests.
We have 6 new requests for continuance. Item B16, case number PC10886, a request to defer to August 10th. Item B19, SPUD 1536, a request to defer to July 27th. Item B21, PUD 1958, a request to defer to July 27th. Item B22, PUD 1959, defer to July 27th. Item B23, PUD 1950, defer to July 27th. And item 24, SPUD 1540, defer to July 27th.
Thank you. Is there anyone here wishing to be heard on any of those items? That's agenda items 16, 19, 21, 22, 23, and 24. Seeing none, we're ready for a motion.
Move to approve the new continuance requests as read.
Commissioner Clare has moved to approve the new continuance requests as read.
And I'll second that motion, but I would also like to ask staff to take another look at the staff report on item 24 on SPD 1540. We are hoping to have another neighborhood meeting, so I don't know how that will work with our timeline exactly, but I think it needs some work.
Okay. We probably want to have a conversation if we can about that too. So the motion again is to grant the new continuance requests as read. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're now in line for our consent docket.
I'm going to pull item 1.
But you can go ahead and
Okay.
read it, I
There are
guess.
5 items on consent today. Item 1 is C7565, the final plat of Wilshire Heights, located east of Coltrane Road and north of Wilshire. Item 2 is C7567, the final plat of Whispering Bend Phase 1, located north of West Hefner Road and west of North County Line. Item 3 is C7571, the final plat of Wrongburg Business Park, which is located east of North Lincoln Boulevard and south of Northeast 150th. Item 4 is CE 1104, a request to close a 17-foot wide north-south easement located east of Mustang Road and north of Southwest 44th. And item 5 is Spud 1528, a request to rezone 3514 North MacArthur Boulevard from C3 to Spud 1528.
Thank you. And we do have a number of people signed up to speak on item 1, so I would ask that we remove item 1 from the consent docket. Is there anyone else wishing to be heard on items 2 through 5? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the consent docket, items 2 through 5.
Commissioner Clare moves to approve of the consent docket, which includes now items 2 through 5 and excludes item 1. The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your vote. And the motion passes. We're now in line for items requiring a separate vote, and we'll begin with item 1.
Okay, again, item 1 is case C7565, the final plat of Wilshire Heights. It's located east of North Coltrane Road and north of East Wilshire Boulevard, and there's also a variance to section 5.4.2.E.5 of the subdivision regulations requested.
Thank you. Is there an applicant present? Thank you. Thank you. Please give us your name and address for the record, and please explain your project.
Hello, my name is Corey West. I'm the owner of 4629 and 4631 East Wilshire Boulevard. After completing my master's in landscape architecture at the University of Oklahoma in 2014, I relocated to Oklahoma City after being born and raised in Tulsa. For nearly 10 years, my family and I have, at this point, have completed an exhaustive effort of locating a perfect tract of land in the beautiful east side of Oklahoma City, specifically east of 35 and south of Memorial. We have had a lifelong ambition as a family to relocate to Oklahoma City after my parents retire, with the intention of living on combined tracts of land. And after the search, we located this specific tract of land with the intention of dividing it into 7 tracts with me as well as my parents and close family members and friends living on the land. And decided to invest significant resources into the land and purchase it, given that it was already zoned as RA, which is why we have submitted the application to you for Wilshire Heights that is compliant with RA zoning regulations.
Thank you. This is in Ward 7. I do know that we have a number of people who are signed up to speak. I do want to say this at the onset, and I will defer my opinion until I've heard from our neighbors, but I do want to be clear with our neighbors. The zoning has been determined. The zoning's been determined. We do not have the authority to take away the existing zoning, which is just RA. And so maybe I should ask Sarah. Sarah, would you mind explaining the limitations of RA zoning so that we're clear? Sorry, I know it was a big ask. I'm sorry.
RA is a rural residential zoning district that allows densities between 0.7 and 1 point dwelling units per acre, depending on the amount of open space provided.
That helps. But just want to be clear that we do not have the authority here to rescind the existing zoning. We are here to determine whether, we're here to decide on the plat, which is how the lots are laid out, where they're placed, where the roads are, et cetera. So we don't have the authority to take away the existing zoning that's been given. So I just want to make that clear. Anything else from our neighbors? Any questions from for our applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our first speaker is Gypsy Hogan.
As that passes around, I'll go ahead and tell you. And I live at 4425 Northeast 63rd in the area of this plat proposal. And I'm a supporting member of the area's Wilshire Coltrane Sooner Preservation Group. We're here today because of a series of unfortunate decisions and circumstances. To start, our neighborhood organization just learned of this plat proposal on June 7th. That's when a former property owner, Chris Nelson, sent us the hearing notice that he had gotten after moving from the area, so it had been forwarded to him. With the 4-day July 4th holiday, we have scrambled to get our heads around this issue. First, we were most shocked to learn that the property was zoned RA. How and why? And it's surrounded by AA agricultural property. So emails have flown back and forth, and we're not as prepared as we normally are for these issues. What we did get done, however, was to identify adjoining property owners and have them voice their opposition to this proposal. In your packet there are signatures from the 3 adjoining property owners. There's one property owner that goes all along the east side, one all along the west, and one all along the north. As for why the RA zoning, we're not asking that you rescind it. I just think it's interesting to understand how that came to be on that piece of property in that little part of a much larger AA area. Chris Nelson, who's forwarded the hearing notice to us, he was owner of both 4625 and 4629 Wilshire. So he gave us this explanation, and I've concluded a copy of his email in that packet also. But his story is perhaps the start of an unfortunate series of decisions. He bought the property at 4629 40 years ago, fully wooded with a small one-bedroom house that was not in great shape. Ultimately, he got rid of that house and he built the gray house that you can now see from the street. Then about 25 years ago, his mother was aging and he decided to build her a little house in the woods behind his house. He called the city and they told him that he had to get RA zoning, which he did. Thus the RA, it was intended for his house and the mother's house behind it. Then last year, his mother went to assisted living, and we all know how expensive that can be. So Chris decided to sell the 4629 property, and that's what brings us here today. He writes in his email, "We were hoping for someone that could use it just like we did, with parents in the back house or family. We thought we had found that buyer when he came with his parents and wrote us a letter saying how beautiful it was, and they had been looking for something like this." Sadly, that was not the case. The buyer, Kimmel Group of Tulsa, quickly bulldozed most of the trees on the property and obviously began the make-money plans that bring us here today. And you can see in your packet there what the property looked like in 2022. This is what your city staff used, but you can see how it was all wooded. Then if you look in your packet, you'll see the other aerial where Kimmel and a bulldozer, what they did to trees that had been growing there since way before statehood. And you can see Chris's mother's house now baking in the sun, as will the houses planned for this site. The misleading buyer of this property made sure area supporters did not have the ability to argue for saving at least 60% of those trees as recommended for the Cross Timbers area in your Plan OKC. Kimmel Group deprived you of honoring that provision. Sadly, the Kimmel Group has added to the destruction of an environmentally sensitive area that benefits all of Oklahoma City and its surrounding communities. Please do not compound this horrible treatment of the land by approving this plat. We all know about slippery slopes and good intentions gone bad. To start a trend of taking small acreages like this and making them into mini developments is a sure way to destroy this tree canopy, this historic ecosystem that city planners have deemed important to the future of our area. Please reject plat proposal C-7565.
Thank you. Next, we have Gary Woodward. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Gary Woodward at 4633 East Wilshire Boulevard, which is directly east of the proposal here. And I had several concerns, but Gypsy told me that two of them were probably met. But anyway, the plat as presented would suggest that access to these 7 family homes would be close to the eastern property line. That would likely cause excess of 30 trips daily, approximately 20 feet from my home, as well as the destruction of the trees that exist there now. And also the additional traffic this proposal, along with the 20-plus homes that have been recently approved, will produce heavier traffic than the narrow section of Wilshire Boulevard can sustain, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Vicky Rose.
Vicki Rose. I live at 7605 North Coltrane Road, slightly west and south of the proposed plat. Just 3 years ago, we were before the Planning Commission seeking to stop a developer from putting 40 homes on 32 acres across the street from the proposed plat before you today. 3 years ago, this area was classified urban reserve. While we were able to limit the number of homes to 21 on that 32-acre site, we're assuming that its presence has now made our area an urban low-intensity designation. In discussions with that developer 3 years ago, we maintained that people are seeking acreages in our area, not additions like in town. We don't have shopping nearby, we don't have excellent schools, we don't even have cable service. What we have are wonderful wooded areas where homes can be built in nature. In fact, when that developer's lots went on the market, the first to sell were his four-acre lots. And a recent count shows that of the 17 smaller lots on an interior loop in that development, 7 are still in the developer's name, one of which is his own home. If you haven't already, I urge you to drive to this area and look for yourself at the development that is occurring on acreages that preserve the cross timbers, as city planners urge, while minimizing impervious surfaces, the impact on water runoff, aquifer discharge, lawn chemical pollution, disruption of wildlife corridors, the list goes on and on. This proposed development, C-7565, offers none of these mitigating factors, seeking to crowd 7 houses on 7.4 acres. The proposed development is like nothing in the area, where most homes are on 5 to 7 acres. The plat will create an outlier addition as well as a horrible precedent for the area. If it encourages others to try to make small acreages into dead-end street additions, the cross timbers are doomed, as well as the overall aesthetic of the area and many ecological benefits, not just to the area, but to the entire city. I have also some specific concerns. Runoff. If you look at the urban low-intensity designation, the use of pervious surfaces is encouraged to
30
avoid
seconds
runoff.
remaining.
With 7 houses parked in this parcel with a long road along one side of the property, sidewalks, driveways, rooftops, runoff will be a problem because the property has a higher ground placement than the surrounding property. Add to that the fact that Wilshire itself is a 2-lane with no curbs, no storm drains, only ditches on either side of the road. Low spots along this road can flood, as it is also hilly. Sewer service. ULI designation encourages, especially with higher gross density, that developments have both city water and sewage service. This property does not have city sewer service. Street design. City planners have asked that developers avoid cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets, which this plat proposes. And while the city staff notes that the street will meet certain standards, we're told that this will be a 20 to 24-foot wide street. This property is in an area which has come very close to being in a major fire. Homes in the
Ms.
area.
Rose, you are out of time, but I want to go ahead and let you finish your last sentence, okay? But you are out of time.
Okay. All right, well, I also wanted to talk about fire safety. Access is a big problem. If you're familiar with the fires in 2007, 2011, access to property to fight fires was almost impossible. The aquifer is an issue, and city planners have guidelines for developers to preserve the area's historic cross timbers, quote, to the maximum extent possible. This developer has obviously bought this property with this plan in mind, and he's preempted the ability of the city to make good on such a preservation plan. In my book, this kind of behavior should not be rewarded, so I urge you to reject the plat proposal.
Thank you. And I don't believe we have any other neighbors signed up to speak. Do we want to let the applicant respond? Commissioners, do you all have questions? Do we want to let the applicant respond to those concerns? And I do want to name some of them, and I'll address some of them later, but questions and issues regarding notice about the original rezoning, issues of tree preservation, concerns about the density and the compatibility of lots of this size in comparison to other lots in the area, concerns about drainage and water runoff, concerns about fire safety, concerns about the vulnerable aquifer as well. So wanted to make sure that I covered some of those issues, so please.
Okay, first I wanted to start and address specifically that the land is not entirely surrounded by AA zoning. Across the street, directly across Wilshire to the south, there is a PUD of a neighborhood development called Nija. It was divided according to RA standards. Also to the north of the north tract above the property, just to the north of that is a dense neighborhood with lots ranging from 0.6 to 1.2 acre on the south side of Britain. That is just a half-mile away, and that is zoned RA as well. So the RA here is not an outlier. There's also multiple tracts less than a half-mile further to the east that have RA designation. I take personally the comment made by the first protester that anybody involved in the transaction felt that I misled anybody. As I mentioned to you, it has been a decades-long initiative by my family to find land to divide for this reason, which is why we found an RA tract, and I represented that to the previous owners fairly, and my parents do plan to reside on this property. I did not mislead anybody. As you can see, the neighbor to the west, the person that is not here for some reason, Nelson, the previous owner that sent a representative to protest on our behalf, the property to the west already has significant tree clearing to the west, and I would estimate that the percentage of clearing of trees on the land currently is somewhere between 35 and 40%. My training and schooling as a landscape architect affords me the specific responsibility and understanding of the importance of native trees that are important to the area, and we have every intention of exceeding building requirements for the area that would allow for just 1 3-inch caliper or 2 1.5-inch caliper trees to be installed with the construction of the new homes. We intend to exceed that by nearly 10 times with native trees such as red buds and sycamores. I also would like to note that we hope that the property tax generated in the area on these 7 residential lots would encourage the city to invest in Wilshire Boulevard, referencing some of the issues one of the protesters brought up about Wilshire with potholes, curbs, those types of things. We also believe that this small neighborhood, with other neighborhoods in the area, I'm not sure why some of the protesters were ignoring those. We do strongly believe that the adjacent property owners will heavily benefit from the increase in property value as well. And I would like to note that we have no intention of applying for any new wells on the property. We are extending city water, and we will install, with engineer recommendations, necessary fire hydrants for fire suppression. And lastly, I would like to emphasize that we have no intention of heavily modifying the land in a topographical way, which should not heavily alter any type of runoff patterns off of the current tract of land.
Thank you. Questions, comments from commissioners before I get to my comments?
I am curious what your intent or what your reason was for going in and removing. I mean, it's clear you removed every tree from property line to property line with the exception of those in the first 120 feet of the property.
Yeah, so my personal property is going to be number 2. It is in an area that requires some grading. The soil composition there is not for up to building standards. And that was where the densest area was for as far as the existing tree line. So those were removed so that I could grade properly and not affect runoff for the adjacent properties.
Other questions, comments from commissioners?
I would, oh, sorry.
I have a question.
Commissioner Meek.
Have you looked at the design on your common area for lot number 1 on the ability to turn around large fire apparatus that would be required?
Correct. So we're looking to do a cul-de-sac or a hammerhead at the end, and I've been in talks with multiple city representatives for different designs for that, and my engineer is planning to submit the necessary road construction documents that will be approved by Public Works, even though it is a private road. I would also like to note that the open space, the bulk of the open space, 1.4 acres, labeled as Lot 1 to the north, is for a buffer of separation between the largest tract to the north of 80 acres and the largest tract that's on the development, which is 1.1 acres. The adjacent property owner to the east is only 2 acres, even though it is designated as AA, which should be the minimum, as 5 acres. The 2 tracts to the west are combined to be 7.25 acres, but they have been separated by the previous owner into 5.25 and 2.0 tracts, and they had every intention of actually selling them individually. And then the neighborhood across the street, they range from 0.6 to 1.5 acres.
Thank you. Other questions from commissioners?
So has the property that you're showing as open space or buffer to the north, has that also been cleared?
Partially has been cleared, yes. That is the lowest area, and we have every intention of getting as close to a level area back there for a possible play area as well as a tennis court for the neighborhood after the private HOA is formed.
Well, I guess I have to say, without casting any aspersions whatsoever on the applicant and his intended use of the property and so forth, that this is a bit of a cautionary tale for us in terms of the consequence of our actions. I mean, I can well imagine that when we heard the story of the gentleman and his mother and her house and him needing RA, that probably didn't require a whole lot of thought on our part. But I think this is a very, very unfortunate result. I'm sure it'll be a lovely area for you and your family to live, but it was a lovely area with a lot of trees up until now. And this is an area in which the aquifer and the cross timbers and the environmental issues are very critical. And, you know, I think we do not give them enough consideration. Unfortunately, you know, at this point, all we're really talking about is how it's going to lay out, because it's already zoned. So, just something to think about.
Definitely. I will say, well, go ahead, Commissioner
Well,
Clark.
one of the questions I had, just, I need a refresher if staff can provide a date when the preliminary plat came to us. Doesn't need one? Okay,
Yeah, a preliminary plat is not required due to the number of lots.
okay.
I will say a few things to our neighbors, really. And the first thing is the notice requirement. We hear about that regularly from neighbors who are concerned about who was sent notice, when they were sent notice. I do think, you know, this commission, we hear these cases and these issues often, and you will often hear me say, the city of Oklahoma City follows the state statute with regard to notice. The developer doesn't send, the applicant doesn't send the notice, the city of Oklahoma City does. The city ensures that there is compliance with what the state law is. So I would encourage you, if you are of the opinion, like I am, that there is not sufficient notice that's given and not a sufficient radius, that we should be advocating with our members of the city council and with our state legislators to change that. But we at this point have not been given any evidence to suggest that the city has failed to reach its obligation to provide the proper notice. As far as I do agree with Commissioner Powers' statements about the trees. I think if we, and just the decision to rezone in general. I think if we knew, we probably were making a decision based on the circumstances of that moment, although I do not remember this case. I don't remember if it was even, if this rezoning was done during my time on the commission. We were speculating earlier, Sarah and I were discussing, and I'm just not certain if I was even on the commission then. But I do think it's an important thing for us to remember that in instances like this, where what really was needed was probably a lot split, we probably should have encouraged the applicant to do that instead of just rezoning and allowing the RA. And so I think it's really important for us to remember the tools that are actually in our tool belt to actually try to limit the times when there's sort of, and this is not your intention, and I understand that, where there could be, but I can also see how the neighbors feel like there's a bait and switch, you know? And I think that's an unfortunate outcome. As far as the other issues, as far as the aquifer and concerns about that and the sewer issues and fire safety issues, I'm really glad to have Commissioner Meek here because we have been missing, I think, having that perspective of someone who has had a profession in firefighting. I think, so I'm glad you're here to provide some insight into those issues as we face them in the future. But I'll say this about the aquifer, as I have asked staff, and they can sit here and tell you how many times I've asked and found different ways of asking this question. What rights do property owners have who are adjacent to a new development? What rights do they have as far as protecting their access to the aquifer, or as far as requiring the applicant to have any protections as far as their obligation to recharge the aquifer? I have not been given a satisfactory answer or a clear answer about what powers we as the Planning Commission have to take any action on that at all. And so I have asked the Municipal Counselor's Office to work on a memo helping us understand how we might address those issues in the future. But at this point, from the information that I have, it is that this site is going to be on city water. So they're going to be drawing from city water. They're not going to be drawing from the aquifer. So our powers, again, are limited. So I agree that this is a very charming area. It's a beautiful area. More development is coming because it's a very highly attractive area for you to live. And I think that we should do all that we can as a commission to protect the trees, to protect the beauty, the natural beauty of this area. But again, with where we are in this process, with this being a plat and not the rezone, we don't have the same ability to act that we did before. So I understand that that is an unsatisfactory answer, but but I am obligated to follow what the powers are that the state and the city have given us to act. So with that being said, I intend to vote yes on the plat, and I'm not aware, unless there are other issues I'm not aware of, what else we can do at this point to make any changes that will truly alleviate the concerns of the neighbors. Sorry, please go ahead.
Well, in your subdivision regulations, it kind of tells you what you can consider in platting. And, 5.1.2 talks about adequate public facilities. And so you can look at things, such as, whether there's adequate public facilities to support and service the area. And that talks about water, sewer, those kind of things, drainage, road improvements. Those are things that you can look at. We also do have a provision in there that talks about the intent and purposes of the comprehensive plan. So that can be a consideration in a plat, but that's in your subdivision regulations.
That's helpful, but won't give us a clear answer
Right.
about answering the issue with the aquifer.
Right, the aquifer, I need to do research on that, but generally that is going to be an issue at the, that is not within our jurisdiction, but probably is in the Water Resources Board or one of those other state agencies, but I need to do research on that.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, and I think we'd be ready for a motion as well.
Yeah, I do have some concern, and I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, but one gentleman mentioned it. So the road, the private access drive is all the way along the east boundary. And looking at the exhibit, that residence is just a few feet from that property line. So is there anything that we can do in regards to a landscape buffer or a screen, vertical screen?
Can we impose a landscape buffer at this stage of the process?
Or we could require it to be redesigned.
True.
So that the, access doesn't come up either side. I see that there's a building, I don't know whether it's a residence or a barn or what, on the west side as well. Looks like it's right on the property line.
I would like to note that the existing property line, tree line buffer that is in place, we have no intention of removing that. And the area between the road and the east property line would remain the tree buffer as well as for drainage. And there are two existing wells on site for 4629 and 4631, and those will be abandoned and capped and no longer be used, so no groundwater will continue to be consumed as well.
How far are you from city water? What's it going to take to get it to you?
City water was expanded as a result of the PUD and neighborhood development directly across Wilshire to the south for Nija, and we will extend it from that as well.
Okay. Sewer and water?
The Dust and Cigarettes Utilities Department, currently there's a 12-inch main along Wilshire that they will tap into and then run a 6-inch main up their private drive and in with the fire hydrant. And then they will place fire hydrants 400 feet in accordance with the fire regulations code.
Thank you. So what is the width of that buffer then between the drive and the property line?
It's currently, as shown there, it is 40 feet, the open space width. The road itself is 24 feet and will bump up to the west border of the open space, so it's between 15 and 16 feet. And I would like to note that the east property owner does not conform with AA or RA minimum lot width standards, and so that is the result of that house being so close to the east property line.
Other thoughts, commissioners?
I agree with Commissioner Powers' sentiments earlier, and these cases really concern me, and the neighbors that have spoke, I hear you, and we struggle with these. In this case, in my view, there's not much we can do. It's a pretty clear case of, the zoning's done. I appreciate what the applicant has said about the tree buffer, and I hope you mean that, because I think that's very important. And the trees have been cut down now, unfortunately, so the sooner you can re-landscape and plant all these new trees, the better, I think, for the community. Nothing else.
I think we're in line for a motion, Commissioners, unless there's further comment.
Mr. Chairman, take the variance first to move approval of the variance to section 5.4.2.E.5 of the subdivision regulations.
Commissioner Clare has moved to recommend move for approval, of the variance to section 5.4.2.E.5 of the subdivision regulations.
Can we be clear about what that is exactly?
That is about accessing, that's about the addresses, for allowing the addresses. I don't know who wants to speak on that from staff.
Naming of a private drive to allow for addressing purposes.
Yeah. They're out of addresses. Whoever wants to be out.
Yeah, Jared Martin, Planning Department. Yeah, so if you were to look east and west of them on Wilshire, typically we would address off of the main road that the private drive is connected to. There's only 9 numbers separating those, which means we only have access to like 3 of them. If you think of odd versus even. So there's not enough addresses left on Wilshire within the range that they need to be able to address this site. So they need to be able to name the private drive so that we can address off the private drive. So.
Thank you. Any further question about that, Commissioner Powers?
On the private drive, is it going to be paved to city standards for a drive, or is it just going to be city standard? Okay.
It is going to be a 24-foot wide drive, as I understand, so it'll be more of a driveway versus a street. Yeah.
So the motion is to approve the variance. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're now in line for a vote on the plat.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve item C 7565, subject to the technical evaluations.
Commissioner Clare has moved to approve of C 7565 and that includes the technical evaluations. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. And we should still, this was the preliminary, right? No, was this the final? Yeah, because I only need one.
There was no preliminary.
Yeah. We're now in line for item 6.
Item 6 is the preliminary plat of Eclipse it's case number C-7570, the preliminary plat of Eclipse located east of North MacArthur Boulevard and south of Northwest 164th Street.
Is there an applicant present?
Ophelia Cancio with Hewitt Zeller, 701 North Broadway, Oklahoma City. We are proposing a multifamily subdivision on Northwest 164th and MacArthur Boulevard. There was a PUD 1716 that was passed just, I think, late last year. And this plat is not very different from the one that was shown in the master plan, so I don't have anything else to add if there's any questions.
Thank you. And we do have a number of neighbors that are signed up to speak on this item. Are there any questions?
One question for the applicant. Do you agree with all the TEs?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, we agree with all the TEs.
Thank you. And I think it would be good if we went ahead and heard from the neighbors. And of course, we are once again to our neighbors. We are once again dealing with a plat, so we're not going to repeat the conversation. Hopefully you were listening, because I hope we don't need to repeat the conversation we just had about our limitations as far as a plat versus an application for rezoning. But we'll start with Brian Richards.
I'm Brian Richards. I back up to this development on the northwest corner About the second house down, essentially. This is my second time here. I opposed the zoning as well. I oppose this plat based upon the density of it. Unfortunately, well, we bought our home here roughly 10 years ago, actually 11 years ago, and when we did, that field was owned by the Catholic Archdiocese. It was zoned R1 agricultural. As we know, in October or November, I can't remember, but the zoning was changed to R1ZL, and so now they're trying to put 107 homes in this small 20-acre plat of land. A little bit about our area. I live in Still Meadows. It's 110 acres approximately. It encompasses the whole west side of the proposed development. It also encompasses the south side, and it borders the south side of Monarch Ridge, which is the neighborhood to the east of it. There's several things I've seen on the commission website that has been submitted by the developer that basically make it look like there's one neighborhood to the west and one to the south. That's not true. There's a lot of misinformation that's been put in there. Our area in Deer Creek is prone to flooding. It's prone to school overcrowding and lots of traffic at this point. This development will be approximately a quarter mile from the elementary school, where right now you probably have 100 different cars that go into the oncoming traffic on a daily basis, crossing a double yellow illegally. Even the school buses do it because they have to be able to get in and pick students up and stuff. So adding another 107 residences is just not a good idea in my opinion. We live in an area where most of the houses are less dense. There's no city parks in our area. Most of the neighborhoods have their own parks that are maintained by, the HOAs. So we all are used to paying higher HOA dues. This particular development has very little common area. You can see 3 areas on there, CAA and CAB and CAC. CAA and CAB are shown as common areas, but they're really just drainage ponds. CAC, which I'm estimating is under a half an acre in size, is their only real common area for the 107 people. If this is allowed to go as prone, it's obviously that people will be going south into our neighborhood and east into Monarch Ridge, enjoying their ponds, their playgrounds, their pavilions, our soccer fields, our 2 playgrounds, and everything else, without having to pay anything for it. I've recently found out that this development is gated, or asking to be gated rather. It's very unclear as to the gates to the south and the east. Are those gates going to allow people and vehicles through, or are they just going to be solid where, it's a separate neighborhood? I'd be a lot less opposed to it if we didn't allow the traffic into the other neighborhoods than if we did, because obviously it's not really fair that we're going to let all the people from this new development into our area enjoy our parks and stuff when we can't go into theirs. So that's a couple of things about the density around there. Still Meadows, as I said earlier, is 110 acres. We have 324 homes. The density is under 3 homes per acre. Monarch Ridge to the right has, I believe, 67 homes, 3.35 homes per acre. This development, on the other hand, is the same size as Monarch Ridge, 20 acres, and they're planning on putting 107 homes in. That would be 5.35 homes per acre. That's a lot of concrete. All that concrete and roofs and everything else is going to basically put a lot of water into the system. Drainage is going to be a problem.
30 seconds remaining.
Okay, drainage is going to be a problem. And again, the traffic going through our neighborhood, if those aren't just solid gates between there. So I know I'm out of time. I had more to say, but that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Michael Kromaz, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
Michael Kromaz, 1326 Fritz Drive, Edmond, Oklahoma. Good afternoon. I am the current HOO president of Monarch Ridge, and I'm here just to represent the residents and the families of our neighborhood to the east of the proposed subdivision. While we have already submitted our official letter outlining our concerns, I wanted to personally address you and highlight the three most significant concerns expressing our neighbors. Firstly, the current preliminary plat does not sufficiently address stormwater runoff. Just heard that. We urgently request a comprehensive study to develop a plan for effective water drainage in and out of the proposed development. Monarch Ridge has already dealt with flooding issues from the property in question, and with more construction and impervious servicing, there will be even more stormwater runoff that our neighborhood detention pond will need to accommodate. There's nothing on the current preliminary plat application that makes note of any of these factors once they leave the site and enter into Monarch Ridge. Monarch Ridge is 20 feet below the proposed subdivision. Our second concern it pertains to the impact of the development would have on adding 107 houses to the already overburdened two-lane road of 164th. This raises a lot of concerns about traffic and safety. We kindly request that a comprehensive traffic analysis be conducted to assess the potential consequences of the development in hopes of seeking recommendations to enhance and ensure safer traffic flow in that area. Lastly, we are concerned about the vehicular connection between our neighborhoods. Should this connection serve as an ingress or egress point of a residence passing through our neighborhood, we have concerns regarding the influx of the speed and the traffic passing directly by our playground and pavilion. We acknowledge the necessity of fostering connectivity between the communities, and we want it. We greatly appreciate and support even the proposed installation of the gates that they've talked about. It would provide a little safer environment just to slow traffic down. But even with that, as a result of all that added traffic, we kindly request alternative speed mitigation measures to be employed to safeguards the children and the residents who often utilize the playground and the pavilion area, both in Monarch Ridge as well as Still Meadows. Thank you for your time and considering our concerns. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a well-prepared letter, by the way.
Do you have specific recommendations about traffic calming?
There are. I'd be interested to hear what a civil would say, but speed bumps nearest the gates, I think, would slow people down. It looks like to me, like on Still Meadows, there's a little bit of a straightaway right into their development. Ours, we do have a curved site, but it's just right by our playground, and as soon as someone hits that curve, they're gonna just run through it. So it's all our neighbors. There's a lot of families there, and I've heard a lot from the HO president of just concern about slowing people down, and just a concern of just the exit and ingress and egress of that development.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have David Bauer.
Good afternoon, Commission. I am David Bauer. I live at 5200 Northwest 161st Terrace in Still Meadows. I'm the current president of the HOA of Still Meadows of 324 homes. I've been asked to speak on their behalf. Again, there were some that are here, and I want to say thank you to the Monarch Ridge neighbors. This has been a joint effort, and we're very, very grateful to you as the Commission for taking time to listen to us today. But also, more than anything, this is a free country, and I'm grateful to you guys for honoring that. So thank you very much. My comments are very brief. I don't want to be repetitive of what you've already heard. The biggest concern that we have is the connection on Dayflower Avenue, which is on the south side of the plat between Lot 1 and Lot 1 at CA-H. In the proposal, it shows that this is a gated community and that there will be gates there, but then in the last written response that I got from the Commission is they felt like that would be a connection point. So I just need to kind of understand what that looks like. And again, we're not there yet. I know we have time and we have things to clarify, but from a traffic standpoint, what we fear is because 164th is their primary entrance and exit. 164th is a two-lane road and is already exceeding its boundaries because of the apartments that have been built to the east off of Portland. We feel like the easiest way for them to exit the neighborhood is going to be to the south and straight down 160th, which is our main boulevard through the neighborhood. We already have a traffic concern at MacArthur. Everyone wants to turn south, everyone wants to turn left. The school bus comes in at that time, so our concern is our 7:30 and our 8 a.m. school bus pickup. Dayflower Lane is where that pickup happens. So if we have traffic coming out of this new proposal for Eclipse in the morning time with school buses and children, we're very concerned. There was a comment made that this would be for crash gate purposes only, emergency access, and if that's the case, we are totally in 110% support of it. We just don't want it to be an ingress and egress for the neighborhood from that standpoint. Mainly for the issue that we're facing, which Still Meadows was platted originally for 109 homes. When the reserves of Still Meadows was added, which was 11 years ago, we now have 324 homes. We still have the same two ingress and egress points, one on 164th, one on 160th. So we've gone from 109 to 324. We're already dealing with the road wear, the damages, the things of that nature. The city's been very good to do as many repairs as possible, but let's face it, with that much traffic, that's what happens. The second issue would be the excess traffic onto 164th. With it being 2 lanes today, I believe the next proposal is 150th would go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, not 164th. So we again have more traffic going to Deer Creek Public Schools to the northwest, as well as to all of the Edmond schools to the east. So very concerned there. The last piece that I just wanted to address is the way the neighborhood is laid out currently as a gated neighborhood. The concern that we have is what is the proposal of barrier or fencing? It's not delineated or explained at this point in time. So we'd like to know what that is, primarily for the neighbors that back up to the west and back up to the south, because today a lot of them, and again, can be changed, but a lot of them have chain link or open fencing. They want to know if that's what they're going to be looking at, or if the neighborhood plans as a gated community to do some sort of a noise abatement or tall 8-foot fence or something of that nature. And that is all that I have, and I just want to thank you guys very much for your time, and I look forward to the response from those folks.
Thank you. Finally, we have Jamie Farley, and I'd ask if you have any new issues that have not been brought up.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jamie Farley. I reside in Still Meadows at 5608 Northwest 162nd Street, so I'm one house away from the barrier of this new proposed neighborhood. I am glad I'm going last so that I can just support the other speakers. I did want to ask, because my understanding from the October zoning meeting was that the zoning had changed to still require a larger lot square footage than this would propose. And again, the density is a big concern for us. The traffic is a big concern. We did have a child last year that got hit by a vehicle because of people speeding through the neighborhood, and we don't want to chance that occurring again, especially with what had been mentioned previously about the entrances and exits to the neighborhood, as well as the fact that our entrance off onto 164th and our neighbors, there's just so many entrances within a very short amount of space that backup is just an additional concern on my behalf. But I fully support all the other comments that were made and would like to request that this be denied or rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any other speakers. I would ask that the applicant clarify it sounds like a very large question, which is, will the streets that provide an entrance on the east side of this development and on the south side, will those be gated? If so, how will it allow for pedestrian access through them? Will it just be a vehicular gate that blocks it? Just as much as you can tell us about that issue.
Yes, they will be gated, and it will be vehicular pass gated.
On both the east side and the south side?
Yes, there will mostly be the crash gates, but they are going to be gated.
Okay. Questions from commissioners?
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Is one, I suppose. We're not, big fans of closing
Crash
off.
gates.
Yeah, closing off access. But I also have some question about the standard to which the streets are going to be built. And would like to hear about that.
Can you repeat, what was the question? I'm sorry.
Standard, are these going to be public streets standards, not, private driveways?
They are 24 feet wide, is that?
Well,
Two,
that's not,
for the
two of them
driveways.
are. So and maybe Barry, I don't know who is the best equipped person to share specifically what is contained in the proposal.
Barry Lodge, Public Works. So the way that it's laid out now on this plat, the two main roads coming in are defined as public, or as private streets. As
Means they
private
meet city
streets,
standards.
They would have to be built to the public street standard, which is going to be a 26-foot curb-to-curb dimension, and it would have the same thicknesses as what we would do the normal public residential street. The driveways that come off of those main roads that would serve the individual lots would be constructed just as private driveways, and those would be private. Now, since they're gating the community, that it's a requirement then that they be the private streets. Now, they could be the private drives, but that would change I think that changed the whole layout and the approval process and the requirements for street naming and all. There'd be a whole lot of other things that come in. So the way that I've seen it on the plat, it is as private streets.
so we do require that it be built to public street standards?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the private streets have to be built to the public street standards. If it goes to the private drives, as we've seen on some of the others, the first one that we talked about this afternoon, those do not. They're a completely different animal when it goes to the private driveways. But as private streets, then they are built to the city standards.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question. So the private drives, one example, it looks like the private drive accesses 6 houses, 3 on either side, and that distance looks to be, there's 3 40-foot lots, so do the math. It doesn't supersede the 150-foot for a fire truck turnaround, but it's a pretty good distance keeping pumpers and engines out on the main road. My question for you is, there's little black gate-looking things drawn on those private drives. I don't know if they're meant to be leader lines for notes or if they're actual gates. Can you explain
No,
what those
those are
are?
on the drives, they're not gates, they're just showing the service lines.
Sewer connection.
Okay, sewer connections. Okay, I was making sure there wasn't anything blocking that access. You see how big the radiuses are on all the other main streets to be able to not only large trucks, but, city services. When you get into turning into these smaller drives, the radiuses become 5 foot or less. It looks like it's going to be a pretty tight fit for anything to get in there. I don't see a reason why on the ones I've went through so far, why those radiuses couldn't be widened or enlarged.
In the driveway?
Yes.
The developer has done a product similar to this, just south of the Penn Square Mall area, Quail Springs Mall area. So these driveways are designed similar to that. In fact, we made them just a little bit bigger, but if there's a fire truck, they should be able to access from the main street.
Won't be able to get down into those little side.
It's a driveway, right? It's treated like a private driveway.
And so how does garbage pickup work?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that I know the answer to that, how that would work.
So I want to be really clear about this issue of the gates. You're not saying that it's gated onto Monarch Field Road and Dayflower Lane in a way that they come up to a gate, they open the gate, and then they drive on. You're saying that at those locations, you're just putting in crash gates?
On the east and south entrance, yes.
And that's permitted by the PUD?
I think so, yes.
I think we need to
believe
get
so.
clarification on that because that is completely inconsistent with the plan. I find it hard to believe that we would not have required that that be a different kind of connection, so.
And I'm curious about, one of our protestants indicated that there had been some negotiation or change, she thought, to the PUD allowance of density. Do you know whether this particular layout shown on the preliminary plat complies with what's allowed in the PUD?
Yes, it complies with what is allowed in the PUD.
Okay.
Staff in agreement with that?
Yeah, would love to get clarification
I would love.
with what is actually required in the zoning.
Okay, I was just going to answer your question about the trash service collection for those alleyways, that are going to the east and west. What they would do is they would have to bring their trash cans out to one of the main roads because the garbage truck can't get in to those side streets, so they would have to put them along the north-south roads.
It'd also be on the south.
Sorry?
The south drive also.
Yes, so all those, the east-west, smaller private drives that we're calling, they would have to bring those out to the major private street area for the trash truck to be able to pick those up because they can't go in there and back out.
But I'm looking at the 4 on the south, 1, 2, 3, 4.
In that southwest corner?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 4 in the center and 1 on each corner, yes. Of the south.
Can we get any clarification on where we stand on, yeah.
Way too much.
I can only go from memory. So when this PUD, and I apologize, I don't have the PUD in front of me, but when it came through the first time, they were asking for, I recall, like 2,500 square foot lots, 3,800 square foot lots. And I believe that the way the final PUD was approved was with the R1ZL base zone, which is a 4,000 square foot lot, 40-foot frontage requirement. Again, from memory, I believe that the site plan for the PUD that they showed couldn't have been accomplished after the rules were changed for the PUD because it was denser than what they had shown. This is all from memory, and I apologize. We can follow up if there's not a decision today. We'll follow up and I'll confirm if what I just said was accurate.
And I would just add to that towards, in the end, we did provide like a modified showing the lot sizes, and these lots range from 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, and they all have a minimum of 40-foot frontage.
I apologize. I was referring only to what this commission would have seen. It would have
Oh, I
gone
see.
on to council and been approved. Yes.
Do we have enough information to, at this point, Commissioner's comfort level, to move this forward and wait on the final plat? Do we need to go ahead and take a continuance, clarify what was in the PUD? How are we feeling?
Well, personally, I mean, I just, the garbage alone is an issue that it seems to me is going to require some redesign. I don't see it as a feasible way to service these properties.
I've seen developments like this where on your 1 day a week, trash day a week, everyone takes their trash out through the alley to the street, and usually you got 4 trash cans sitting on each side of the drive, and it looks a mess, but it's 1 day a week.
One thing to remember, Commissioner Powers, is that each resident has the ability to have 4 containers. So.
We also have to remember, Commissioners, this is a plat, so we're not going to be able to engage with the applicant on any further discussion if we were to continue this item as well. Between, I guess we could talk to staff about what the PUD says, but this is our place to negotiate any changes.
haven't had enough conversations with utilities, but is there an opportunity to do, I mean, they're probably, in this instance, they're probably gonna have gang mailboxes. You know, is there an opportunity to do gang recycling and trash pickup? I don't know. I don't know if that's, I'm thinking out loud, but to their point, yes, I forgot about the recycling bins. So now each unit has up to 4 containers with 107 units.
Go ahead, Commissioner Boveen.
I don't have the same level of concern on the trash because I feel that they will work that out, and I have seen developments like this work. But I'm not saying that that issue is not still worth discussing by others. The gated portion is, I don't like the gates. That doesn't foster connectivity. However, the gates seem to be what everyone wants in this case, so that makes that particular one difficult.
That's still within our discretion.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we need to think about that, obviously.
Actually, would be much more comfortable if they were gates. I'm not crazy about gated communities, period, but it mostly has to do with infrastructure and that kind of thing, and that seems to be okay. But if they were gates that you came up to and let yourself in and out of, so that it would, to the point that these folks are making about traffic, it would at least slow people down. They wouldn't be just zooming through there from one neighborhood into another. I think that would be a better solution. But crash gates, it's not a thing anymore, really, unless there's some actual physical reason why you can't get from one place to another.
At this point, I think the question for us is, do we move this on and wait for the final plat to resolve any of these issues, or do we continue this item until we can get clarification about what exactly our authority is as far as what the PUD requires on all of these issues?
I say the latter, because we have been developing a pattern of putting final plats on the, consent docket. And, I think we need to resolve these issues at the preliminary plat stage.
Well, then it sounds like...
I would just say the current plat does meet PUD requirements, and it was, and we did agree to the TE, so I don't know that there's any additional issues that would arise that the plat's not meeting those PUD requirements.
It sounds like there are several. One is whether we agree that the way that you've recommended laying out this site is in a satisfactory way that we think is good and healthy for the city of Oklahoma City and a healthy neighborhood. I think so. The issues of access for fire, for the garbage cans, so that's all affected by the way that the site is laid out. The other issue is, what gate did we agree to in the PUD? What authority do we have to change those gates, if any, at the plat stage? And that I can't have clarified unless staff can tell me exactly what the PUD says and what authority we have right now, which it doesn't sound like we're in a position to be able to do.
The PUD doesn't specify the type of gate that would be required, but I can get our client to provide what that gates would look like. And if this is approved, we can have that as a contingent thing to provide to you all for the next meeting.
I think, go ahead, Jared.
Jared Martin, Planning Department. Curtis has offered to run and get a copy of the PUD if we want to move this to the end of the docket.
I just pulled it up.
We could answer the question. Just in general, though, from a gating standpoint, the subregs would require an emergency access to this subdivision in addition to the main access. So the crash gates / emergency access into those other subdivisions would satisfy that requirement. Again, we need to look at the PUD to see if that was discussed or one or the other was required. It sounds like there may be some desire on one side for them to be crash gates and on the other side not to be crash gates.
But exactly, but I find it hard to believe that we didn't address it in some way clearly, because I know, and I know neighbors don't like hearing it, but we still very consistently promote that connection between neighborhoods. And so I find it hard to believe in this instance we did not do that.
It looks like Mr. David Box probably knows some details on this.
I don't know, but
Was the
Well,
gate,
unless council changed it, which is possible. I would feel most comfortable, I think we need to, my recommendation is we continue this item for 2 weeks. I don't think we're ready. And so I would encourage us as a commission to submit specific questions to staff so that staff can facilitate conversations with the applicant. My vote will be for a continuance. So we just need a motion to decide how we want to move forward. We can either wait until, we can postpone this item until the end of the agenda, we can continue, we can say yes. We can say no.
I don't think I'm liking any better at the end than the beginning.
So we just need someone to propose a motion so we can move forward.
I move that we continue the item to the July 27th meeting.
The motion, Commissioner Clare moves to continue item 6C 7570 to the next meeting of the Planning Commission. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Again, commissioners, we are not allowed to have conversations, and to clarify for our neighbors, we are not allowed to have conversations with you. We are not allowed to talk to you about this issue at all, nor are we allowed to have these conversations with the applicant. So if you have specific questions, I would encourage you to reach out. We have wonderful staff for the City of Oklahoma City that can assist you with your questions. You've heard me state to commissioners, what questions you have that need to be answered need to be submitted to staff for us to resolve these remaining issues. So just wanted to make that clear. We're now ready for item 7.
Item 7 is case number C7568, the preliminary plat of Northwest 2nd Tiny Homes, located west of Northwestern Avenue and north of West Main Street, and also a variance to section 5.2.1 of the subdivision regulations is requested.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Caitlin Turner, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant who is here with me. Another plat application. We also have the corresponding final plat, which is second item. The staff report recommends approval subject to TEs, which we agree to. Fully complies with the SPUD that is governing the property at the moment. So full conformance there. We agree to all the TEs. There is the variance that would have to be approved, which will just allow full conformance with that SPUD that's already in place. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions for you all, and we would request a recommendation for approval.
Thank you. And this is in Ward 6, Commissioner Govine.
Yes. Look, I'm supportive of the development, particularly in this part of town and building density. It seems that you said you agreed with all the TEs.
Correct.
The TEs seem to be fairly significant enough that I don't feel that we can approve the preliminary and the final without seeing this again after we've adjusted it to accommodate these TEs.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so I guess where I am is I would like to see it after the TEs have been incorporated, because that's going to significantly change, I think, what's on paper here. The site layout. So I personally, I can't speak for anyone else, and I don't believe there's anyone from the public to speak on this. Is there? Okay. I support this, but I'm not going to be the same on the final.
Understood. There are some notes. For example, TE5 here that is requesting information about easements. There are some easement and setback details that are shown on the preliminary plat and final plat. Those are in the right side, right there. So there is some information regarding the utility easements, or excuse me, I know that's not pedestrian easements, but there is some easement information. There's also information, I believe, on here about the common space, which we are meeting the 20% common space that's required in the SPUD when you're calculating the space in between the lots as well as the common areas. There are 3 within this preliminary plat. And then for number 3, I did want to specify fire suppression. I talked to Oklahoma City staff about this one. There are hydrants in the area. There is public water. So and there will also be access that complies with fire department requirements. I just want to say for the record that sprinklers won't be installed in each unit. I don't know if that is what was expected. I had talked to Jared, and he said that that was not the intent with that TE. So that's not really a TE necessarily. That would be fully depicted, I guess, on the preliminary plat, except for maybe that access for fire department regulations. But there are some TEs that these are kind of already addressed in the preliminary plat.
Okay.
Not to, go ahead, Commissioner Govine.
Well, I think let's hear what other people have to say.
Well, I guess my question would be on TE3 that doesn't need to be answered in this moment, but I hope staff can find an answer. So how are we defining fire suppression and access per the fire department's requirements in this instance of this particular application? I'd love to know the answer to that question. Second, Caitlin, can you describe for me, I'm not understanding how residents on the north side of this development have access to their homes. Are they walking through the yards of the people who are on the south side, and that's how they get to it? And then if for parking, I'm assuming that they're parking off the street as well.
So they're going to be parking along Second. The SPUD accommodates or specifies that off-street parking will be in front of the development, and there'll be pedestrian easements all throughout. So similar to a multifamily, where you would see the parking in one area and then everyone walks their units. I know there's some fourplexes, and I lived in a place with that similar setup. That's going to be the intent here. Since it is a tiny home development and it is going to be enclosed, it will be its own community, so it'll be parking here, and then owners will walk to their unit from parking. And again, pedestrian easements will accommodate that.
I think that answers my legal question. So I think the next question is, I think, well, I guess it's not a question.
Well,
I think I agree with Commissioner Govine.
On that point, though,
yes, please.
Because I'm not, I'm reading TE2, and it's the developer's requesting a variance. Okay, you're requesting a variance, which, yeah, so you don't have to provide the street platted at private access drive. Okay, so that would be a separate, all right.
As I recall, Caitlin, when we originally, again, I just had this discussion with staff about this particular site and when we rezoned it. And as I recall, the layout that we saw at that time, and I understand that things change, so I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to change it. The issue I have is this does not seem optimal as an optimal way of laying out this site. And I'm all for density, I am all for tiny homes, I am in support of trying to have a variety of housing types in Oklahoma City, but the way that this site is laid out and the way that it leads someone who is a home buyer to have a reasonable understanding of what they own, where they can go, it just doesn't seem clear to me. And I think I definitely am a strong proponent of Commissioner Govine's position that we approve the preliminary if we're going to, and then let's see the new site before we see the final. So you won't have my vote for the final plat today without seeing what the implementation of these TEs actually does for the site layout. But I guess that's a statement. That's not a question. But I have serious concerns about the way it's laid out.
I do have the SPUD here, which I know oftentimes you see the site plan is conceptual with rezoning applications, but this one is pretty identical to what the preliminary plat looks like.
But those were for rental properties, right?
Correct. So it is a rental property. The layout is going to be the same. The community will be a very similar feel. It's simply that the lots may be sold. Right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Other thoughts from commissioners? I've been very inarticulate today.
You know, you're doing great. My question may be one really more for staff, and it relates back to my closing comments at the end of our last meeting regarding tiny homes. You know, that term means something different to almost everybody you ask. And my question would be more to staff, like, what does it mean to us? Are these structures going to be required to meet the same standards that other dwelling units meet in terms of, you know, how they're built and fire safety and suppression and all of that kind of good stuff? I assume they're not on wheels, for one thing.
No. And I see Mr. Martin shaking his head yes here. They will have to be developed in accordance with the same subdivision regulations as a standard single-family detached home.
Yeah, Jared Martin, Planning Department. So basically, tiny homes in Oklahoma City, we don't really have, you get the picture of something on a trailer. We don't really have a standard for something like that. But a tiny home being a house that's smaller than a normal house still has to meet the building code. Same requirements, same permitting requirements they would have to go through. So we don't really have a limit or a minimum or maximum as long as it meets the building code. So,
Okay.
yeah.
By the way, I also agree that I'm not ready to vote on a final plat today. I want to see what this is going to look like, so.
Okay.
I would, and I'm new here, when I see the word final plat and I don't see streets, I don't see curbs, I don't see sidewalks, it's concerning. And so I would ask that if that's how we do it, we approve the preliminary but not the final, that this drawing be improved.
And we can certainly, when the next item comes up, continue that. We would be agreeable to that.
And as a surveyor, I don't see a Oklahoma CA on this drawing either, so technically it's invalid, just a FYI. So blew that.
Dustin Seagraves, Utilities Department. I just want to answer your question about the fire coverage.
Please.
Fire hydrants, according to DEQ and the fire code and everything, fire hydrants have to be spaced 500 feet in a residential area. There's a fire hydrant just on the corner of 2nd and Douglas, I believe it is, that meets that requirement.
For TE3. Cool.
Yes, I just measured on GPS, it's roughly about 350, 400 feet from that fire hydrant. If you do a hose lay, it's not a straight line, but if you had to lay a hose from the fire hydrant to the development.
I've seen other pocket communities, and the way that the streets are laid out and the access to the individual lots makes more sense than this. I'm not certain that we're making a wise decision by allowing these lots to the north to have no street access whatsoever. And I understand that, standards are changing, and again, I'm progressive in that regard, but I think that the site should be laid out better to allow for individual access that's more clear, maybe a common street in the middle and the lots are to the east and west instead of this layout that requires me to, I guess, walk in between the homes to get to my house?
Well, I mean, in my view, that's the whole point of why subdivision and zoning included the notes about pedestrian access needs to be shown and indicated. A note should be added to the plat to indicate where these are and how they are to be maintained. That is a recommended following change for the preliminary plat. So that's what we want to see. And
Right.
I'm not going to, I'm not going to try to play a designer or architect. I think there's probably a very creative and good way to solve that. That's going to be a nice community, but I'd like to see it.
Will it all be in easements? So there's going to be a pedestrian easement, utility easement?
Right.
So I think if we saw that,
Yeah.
probably get around it.
And I will also say, just the nature of the area and how there's other developments, Wheeler is one of them, where not every house has that frontage or that access. This
Yeah.
is gonna be kind of similar in nature, more to that higher density. And again, very similar to or identical to the rental community that was originally proposed. Of course, these lots can be sold, and I understand the issue there, but I think just given the urban nature of this site and then other pocket communities like you were talking about, there are more that are similar to that, where not every single lot is gonna have that frontage.
That's a good example. I think the reason why my analysis entirely changes when I hear it's a rental property is I'm like, oh, well, that's not different than an apartment complex, where
Right.
you might park somewhere else and then you walk through,
Right.
But again, different expectations get created when you're talking about home ownership of these individual lots. And so I just have a general concern, but I think there's consensus here on that. So any other questions that are new?
I guess I do have another question. Maybe this was discussed at the zoning stage, but I don't remember. I mean, how is this, if you're going from rental to ownership, you're also having to deal with utilities. They have to be individualized. How is that working?
There'll be utility easements. I think Dustin will shed some light on that one.
Yeah, Dustin Seagraves Utilities Department. Each lot has a private utility easement on the east and west side. And so what will happen is you have the sewer line in the alley, and then you have a water line in the front. So all the water meters for each unit will be in the front along, I think that's Northwest 2nd Street. And so the private service lines will be running through everybody else's lot back to there. But it is a platted private easement, so it is legal to be able to do it. There is space there, we believe, but the thing is with the water meters in the front, if there's space there with their parking and some other things in there that we saw previously that we met with them. So again, with the final plat, we would have to kind of look through those things, and we would discuss those at the time of the building permit.
Minimum 20%.
Yeah, we did meet with utilities prior to submitting anything, and there is a common area along frontage for each of these. So that would accommodate. There's also, this is kind of where that easement and setback details comes into play. That's going to show those utility easements that run through each lot and around each lot.
Right, and we would just, what we have done in the past is other, on this one, if for the final plat, we would just ask for we would want to see the locations of where they plan on putting the water meters at. So that way we can ensure that they're in a grassy area, they're not behind a fence line, they're accessible and things like that. So that's something that we could work out and request at the final plat stage.
Okay, so maybe I'm getting into the weeds here, but I mean, are we talking about, say, the three, you've got water lines like this, or to each?
Correct.
Then they're going to take up?
Correct. So you have the visual, if you have the sewer line in the front or in the back, water line in the front, you're going to have a water line from each going up the side of each unit in that private easement to be able to reach the back of those units. So you're going to have a water line on each side of a house, and you're going to have a sewer connection because the sewer line's on the back, and so now you're going to have a sewer connection going through each of those easements as well. So.
And so this is different from some of the things that we talk about when we're doing individual.
This is
because the water's right there.
Right. This is similar to those flag lots issues that we were trying to discover and trying to find a way to be able to do it with the private easement agreement. With this being a platted easement, private easement, then individual agreements aren't necessarily needed to be able to file with the county, but as they're platted, then that plat is filed with the county, and therefore each homeowner will be able to be aware that there is a private easement on their property for the neighboring lots.
Okay, thank you.
And again, if this were to go ahead and get recommended for approval, we would be agreeable to continuing that final plat so you all can see all of these revisions that we are able to agree to prior to making a recommendation on that final plat.
I think that works. Other thoughts?
Oh,
We'd have to vote on the variance first, by the way. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just trying to move things forward. If no one else has any comments, then I move to approve the variance to section 5.2.1 of the subdivision regulations.
Commissioner Govine moves to approve of the variance to section 5.2.1 of the subdivision regulations. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. We're now in line for a vote on the item.
And I will move, are we recommending or
moving? Approval.
We're moving approval of C7568.
Commissioner Govine moves to approve of C7568.
Subject to the technical.
Subject to the technical evaluations.
Correct.
And that motion, we need a second. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. Thank you. That motion passes. We're now in line for item 8, and I understand we're going to vote to continue it anyway, but I guess we still need to read it into the record.
Okay, item 8 is case number C7569, the final plat of Northwest 2nd Tiny Homes located west of Northwestern and north of West Main Street.
Commissioner Govine.
I move to continue C7569 to July 27th.
You're good.
That works, yes, thank you.
Commissioner Govine moves to continue item 8 until the next meeting of the Planning Commission. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're now in line for item 9.
Item 9 is DA5PH, which is a lot split deed approval application located at 17840 North May Avenue, which requires a variance to section 3.4.4.C.2F of the subdivision regulations.
Good afternoon, Purvi Patel with Wallace Design Collective. Address is 410 North Walnut, Oklahoma City. I am representing the property owner. We had submitted for a lot split to create 3 lots, and then additionally requested a lot split on the largest lot to the south, and staff had informed us that this could go through a deed approval through public hearing. The infrastructure is already in place. There's a water line on May Street. The SD plans for a sewer line have been approved. Detention plans have been approved for this property as well. So we're just requesting approval for the deed to create 3 additional parcels.
Excellent. This is in Ward 8. Commissioner Noble?
Yes, I don't believe there's anybody to speak on it.
Nope.
I don't have any problems with it. As staff, they're comfortable with it, so.
Any questions from commissioners before we move this forward? Commissioner Noble?
First, move the variance, section 3.4.4.C.2F of the subdivision regulation.
Commissioner Noble moves to approve the variance to section 3.4.4.C.2F of the subdivision regulations. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Commissioner Noble.
With that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to approve case number DA-5-PH.
Commissioner Noble moves to approve of DA5PH. Motion's been seconded by Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're now in line for item 10.
Item 10 is PUD 1715 SP 7, which is their application for a specific pursuant to the approval of PUD 1715. This is for the oak located at 5101 North Penn.
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. It's a tough day to be a plat here. Luckily,
I'm telling you,
this is an application that is not a plat, nor are variances needed. So, this is the latest specific plan for the oak development. It's, I think, what many would consider kind of the centerpiece. When my client and I started having conversations with Ms. Powers back in, I think, like 2017. Yes, this was always kind of the vision of what the oak would be, and this was always kind of the centerpiece. So where it's located, it's prominent along Northwest Highway. As you scroll through here, if you don't, or I have the mouse, can I do it? So it's this central pad right there. We've already come through, as you know, with the specific plan for Capitol Grill and our house. If you've driven by there, you've seen the hotel is well underway, as well as the multifamily piece. So real quick, just your orientation, what you'll see. So this is the orientation that you would see from that interior courtyard in oak. And then this is that north elevation. So this is what you would see along Northwest Highway. So it complies with the PUD. There are no issues that I'm aware of. We're happy to bring it here. I've got folks from RH as well as Kimley Horn in the audience as well if there are any technical questions. But it does conform to the PUD, and it's the vision that Ryan had all those years ago. So we'd be happy to answer any questions, and we're hoping for your approval.
Thank you. This is in Ward 2. Commissioner Powers.
Well, I mean, of course, I could be happier that we're finally at this place. If you've been by the site, it's just, booming. It seems to just change daily in terms of what it looks like. Can't wait for it to be completed and open. I don't think that there's anything controversial at all about the specific plan. If somebody else has a different view, I'm open to hear it. But as Mr. Boggs said, I think this was where we've always been headed. So we have nearly arrived.
It's great. And I'm excited about this project, excited about the growth that's happening in the area. So I think I'm in full support. Any questions, any other questions, comments from commissioners before we vote? I think we're ready, Commissioner Powers.
I'll move for approval of the specific plan for SP 07 for PUD 1715.
Commissioner Powers moves approval of SP 07 for PUD 1715. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now in line for item 11.
Item 11 is PUD 1957, an application to rezone 11800 Southwest 104th Street from PUD 1103 to PUD 1957.
Once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. So this is a PUD that would break a current PUD, PUD 1103, and allow for a slightly smaller lot. So when PUD, could you go to the aerial? When PUD 1103 was designed, it was required to have each lot be a minimum of 2 acres. Well, once that beautiful pond was installed, the problem became the second lot now only has 1.61 acres. So what this PUD is really trying to do is to modify the 2-acre minimum to a 1.61 acre minimum, but it doesn't alter the density. It's still just the 2 lots that was originally approved in that PUD 1103. There are no TEs. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Meek, this is in your ward.
Unless anyone has any questions, I agree with this and move to approve.
Commissioner Meek moves to recommend approval of PUD 1957 to City Council. It's okay. The motion's been seconded by Commissioner Govine. I think we can correct that. Commissioner Meek was the one who moved the motion, who made the motion, excuse me.
First item in his ward, and he didn't even get to make the motion.
Yeah, didn't get to press the button. I just want to make sure that's clarified in the record. I think, are we able to fix it on here or no?
We'll do it in the minutes.
Okay, it'll be fixed in the minutes. Please cast your votes.
Thank
The
you.
motion passes. Thank you. We're now in line for item 12.
Item 12 is CPA 2023-00004, which is a consideration to amend the comprehensive plan from the urban low and urban future land use typology areas to the rural medium land use typology area located near Southwest 104th and South Rockwell.
So it's the CPA 2023-00004. The actual original application was for the 18.7 acres that you can see there on like purple pink, but the staff recommend to extend to the whole 160 acres, and basically is to amend the comprehensive plan from urban future layer and urban low base to rural medium. There is an associate application, PC 10893. There is the location of the CPA. Right now, the 16 land use is undeveloped, but we can see that even though it says undeveloped, there is some residents that are already being built to the kind of like almost in the same site, and when the site is almost surrounded by rural residential. In terms of zoning, the actual site, it's zoned, the whole site is zoned PUD 1620. Like I mentioned before, the land use typology is urban future with an urban low base. There's water available on site. There's no sewer, I believe, on site. The applicant is proposing to use septic. The closest sewer line is more than a mile, a little bit over a mile distance from the site. In terms of emergency services, the site is projected to have rural response time for fire emergency services. In terms of environmental sensitive area, this site has some riparian areas. Riparian areas are very important for flood prevention and in terms of habitat. The site is completely either on a floodway or in the 1% annual chance of flood. The site too is covered by fluvial pathways. Due to the provision of water and emergency service, but a lack of sewer services in the vicinity, the parcel land use typology should be designated as rural medium. The applicant proposed to extend water to the 18.7 acre parcel. The site is entirely covered by riparian area, and almost all of the 18.7 acre parcel is located in the 100-year floodplain. Due to those conditions, the rural medium LUDA designation will provide or improve protection and management of the environmental sensitive areas. Due to that, the staff recommends approve of this application. If you have any questions.
Can I ask a question? Can you explain just simply how does the rural medium improve the protection and management?
It's less density. Right now it's urban low. The other option that we have is to keep it as urban low. So urban low is more, it's less dense, it's more dense.
Okay.
So rural medium will provide a better provision for less density.
Is that the only difference? Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious, but thanks.
I mean,
I wonder
we
if there's
could
anything.
discuss a lot of
figure out there.
environmental reasons, but as far as
Good.
plan OKC, that's the provisions that I have.
Just out of curiosity, with the floodplain adjacent to this area, or running through this area, do you have any idea what it looks like right now after this last couple of weeks?
When I went to the area, it was not flooded, so I'm not really sure. There is a reality to that. We know that even though we don't have the updated maps, what it was called the 1%, now it's called the 2%. But it is a concern. It is a concern for the staff. But in terms of Plan OKC, rural medium provides a better protection for the area. In terms of building and everything else, that's another division.
Well, I guess that's a zoning. I'm about to make a zoning statement, so never mind. Any other questions about the comp plan amendment? I think we're ready for a motion if there's no other questions.
Can you give me a 1, 2, 3? Why are you recommending approval?
The main reason why we recommend approval is because we believe that less density will provide a better protection for the area. That's the main reason why we recommended approval. We have to follow what are the recommendations in Plan OKC, and if we strictly follow that, that's the main reason. My personal opinions doesn't really matter on terms, and like I mentioned, right now I'm here to talk only about the comprehensive plan in terms of building and what happened in terms of parcel construction on the parcel. That's a different. But as a staff, in terms of density and everything else, we believe rural median will provide probably better protection for the area. If it should be built or not on that side, that's a
That was what I was about to comment on.
that's a different.
Feel free.
We just need a motion, commissioners. Motion for the comp plan amendment. Up or down?
I'll move approval. Staff's recommending approval. I'll move approval.
Commissioner Powers moves to approve of the comp plan amendment 2023-00004. And that motion has been seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes. Thank you. We're now in line for item 13.
Item 13 is the associated zoning case to the previous item. It's PC 10893, an application to rezone 9801 South Rockwell Avenue from PUD 1620 to the RA2 single-family 2-acre rural residential district.
Before you start, I must warn you that I have to go because I have to get on a plane for vacation. So I'm gonna stay for as long as I can until 3:30, and I'm gonna leave, but I just don't want that to throw you off, that in case we're still considering this case, given the way this day has gone, we may be here a minute. So I just want to warn you, it's not personal, but I am gonna leave if we're not resolved by 3:30. Okay, please go ahead.
My name is Chris Colane with Grubbs Consulting, 1800 South Sarah Road, here representing the applicant. This is a rezoning application for just over 18 and a half acres that you just, you heard the comprehensive plan amendment on. This would rezone the property from PUD 1620 to RA2. Because you approved the comprehensive plan, staff recommends approval of this rezoning, and it sounds like there's questions, so I'd be happy to answer those as best I can.
Commissioner Meek, this is in Ward 3. Do you want to start us off?
I will let someone else start.
Great. Then you can get to my question, I guess, about did you happen to be here for our wonderful discussion about plats earlier today, or did you come a little bit later? It's okay if you.
I've been here the whole time.
So then I don't need to re-explain what about the issue of if we go ahead and approve this rezone, you see how heavily wooded this area is, how prone to flooding it is, and then we're going to try to fit homes on there, and I'm going to have pews and pews of people who are your neighbors to the southwest of this tract of land who are going to be complaining that we are going to create problems for their neighborhood because we're not respecting the trees, we're not protecting this floodway, we're not doing any of those actions. So why wouldn't I just prevent that right now and just say no to rezoning this property altogether? Why shouldn't we do that? And I guess my question goes to what mitigation or promises can you make to us that we can include in this PUD that can prevent the kind of problems or mitigate the kind of problems that those neighbors were expressing?
So this is rezoning from the current PUD to RA2. I'm not briefed on the specifics of the PUD. I believe that PUD allows for more dense residential use than RA2. I believe RA2 is 2-acre minimum lot size. Because most of this property is floodplain and riparian areas, I believe the intent is to not develop the whole property, but to fit residences where they can be fit on this property to minimize whatever work would need to be done in floodplain or around floodplain. Whenever you get into situations like that, developing becomes expensive, especially if you're just building a few homes. So does that answer your question?
It helps for sure, especially since, well, we already have existing zonings more dense, so.
If any modifications of the floodplain or building adjacent to floodplain happens, we have to meet Oklahoma City requirements, we have to meet FEMA development requirements, and we have to meet Army Corps development requirements. So,
I'm not certain that's enough.
I have a question for staff, and that is, if we don't approve this and we leave it at the PUD, the current existing PUD, they can't build anything on that because the existing PUD only allowed one access to Rockwell?
Yeah, that's our understanding. So the existing PUD allows 30,000 square foot lots with water and septic systems, or aerobic. The current PUD limits access to one on Rockwell. And so our understanding is that by removing this and putting it into the RA2 zone, then they'd be able to develop under that zoning district, which I can go into about some of the challenges they might face with lot coverage and density. And then, of course, they'd have to comply with the Corps and FEMA and city for development in or near the floodplain.
What can we do, or what would you recommend? And I guess I should be looking at have the TEs directly in front. Oh, it's not a PUD. This is just for straight RA, sorry. Yeah, I have serious concerns about us approving this without our ability to do anything to preserve the trees, do anything to prevent the issues with the floodplain, access questions, density questions that all seem like we're going to be stuck at the plat stage and be unable to take any meaningful action. So I think we should question whether we should move forward.
I agree with all of that. For one thing, I mean, under the RA, they could develop lots that are like virtually urban-sized lots under the clustering, couldn't they? If they want to just block out, you know, the floodplain and say, well, we're just going to leave all those trees, we're not touching any of that, but that gives us the ability to, I mean, the actual lot size that would be developed can be brought down, even like to a 6,000 square foot lot, couldn't it?
Under the
By clustering.
Well, the RA2, well, first they have the challenge of they won't have sewer service, so they're going to have to.
Septic.
They're going to have to. So the RA2 allows minimum lot sizes of 30,000 square feet. However, it also controls density. I think even if this was completely clear, the maximum number of lots they could get is maybe 8 under the existing, if this were to change. The challenge I think they'll face in this, this site configuration is the frontage requirements for the RA2 zone, because if they were going to try to put a house and take access from Rockwell, they'd have to have 300 foot of frontage. If they were going to put homes or plat it with a street, if they could get a street into that subject site, then each lot would have to have 120 foot of frontage. So I think that those are the factors that'll probably control the design. I would look to the applicant to how many they think they.
I believe at this time the intent is to not modify too much. The owner really wants to just try and get 1, 2, maybe 3 homes in this space, if that's possible. We haven't looked in detail on how that would lay out at this point, but I know that the desire is to not get too much into floodplain sensitive areas.
Oh, SPUD.
Yep.
Well, here's one thought of mine is, how many, you know, I don't remember this PUD, but we see these and they're like, well, yeah, look at the density, but look at all this green space we've left. You know, and that would have looked really nice in this PUD, and then it's back later and that green space is being carved out for more space, so that's why I don't like it.
I think that's right, and I think that's one of the reasons why it needs to be, you know, put into an SPUD. I mean, I'm really not interested in giving them much of what's already there. I mean, as far as the tree cover and all of it, they can find a way to get 3 houses on there. That's great, but between the floodplain and the tree cover, I think it's going to be tough. But I want to see it. I mean,
I agree.
You know.
I've got something other than, you've only got a couple minutes. I live in an area just like this that everybody that lived on these Gentry Crossing back street thought, this is what I'm buying, this is what I've got. Beautiful green area, drainage, creek behind me. And the developer in my addition was able to only get about 1 house because of the frontage requirement, as you spoke about, and get a driveway off onto, which would be Rockwell in this case, and do all that without having us to approve what they're asking now. So I will speak towards against this.
I'm not convinced to the point, I know I'm running out of time, so I'm sorry, but I'm not convinced an SPUD is even a good idea based on what Commissioner Govine just said. We made the decisions we did about the other zoning on this, for this property, under the idea that this would probably count towards common area, the green space, all of these things that we were taking into consideration in that moment, and then we're coming back and changing our minds about it in an area that just does not look appropriate for this kind of development. So, I mean, if the applicant wants to try to bring back an SPUD, I guess I shouldn't try to stop them, but my vote's no for rezoning. I guess they can just figure out what to do with their existing rights.
I mean, with the existing zoning, you could build across the creek and fill up that side. You could clear all the trees.
This is a good point.
So in my mind, we're going to a less dense zoning.
It's true. Thoughts, commissioners?
Can't fill in a floodplain.
There's got to be an offset distance we're trying to look up the Blue Line Creek designation.
Well, there's also a plat that went with the PUD, right? So we'd have, we'd have to look at that to see what.
Plat would only be required if lot sizes were less than 5 acres, I
And
believe.
this subject site is not in a final plat.
So I guess I come back to where I was before. If, I think I'm a hard no on this rezoning request. But if you're interested in, you know, bringing it back to us as an SPD, I'd be glad to move for a continuance.
Any thoughts on that?
So what would be the difference in an SPUD? What would you be looking for in that?
Tree preservation, clarity about how we'd be able to protect the floodway plain, all of that. I'd want to know where you were gonna take access and how. And some more assurances about the lot sizes, and so that we have some control over the density.
So it
I'm getting a
sounds
head nod
like
from
we need
Commissioner
to,
Noble.
I
I
need to
feel good about
request to
that.
continue this and bring back an SPUD? Is that how you?
Or your option is to take a recommendation of denial. It sounds like, if I'm looking at the votes on the horseshoe right now, and then go to city council, they may not agree with us.
I would like to request to continue it, please.
Okay.
How long do you need?
Let's give it 2 weeks. Is that adequate time?
No, I'm sorry. I think it'd probably be August 24th, because you have to be a new application, we'll have to convert it, you'll need a master design statement, and we have to renotice.
So that's next month,
Yep.
24th.
But if you want to take 2 weeks just to consider whether or not you even want to do an SPUD or not,
Think so.
then
I'd
maybe
like
we
to
should just
talk to-
continue it, and
yes.
if you need a further continuance, you can still request another one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that
So it sounds
idea.
like we want to just go to the 27th.
On this.
Commissioner Meek, do you want to?
Yeah, I move for that motion.
Commissioner Meek moves that we continue this item to the next meeting of the Planning Commission, July 27th. That motion's been seconded by Commissioner Privet. Please cast your votes.
Yeah.
And the motion passes. And before we go to our next item, I will leave.
Quick question for Sarah or me. Do I have to relocate, log out and relocate? Best? Okay.
You're
Then
going to
I-
use the gavel? Do you promise to use the gavel?
Yes.
So should we take 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes so I can get logged out and log back in.
We'll stand at ease for 5 minutes. Sorry about that.
All right.
Oh, I thought you told me to come up.
If everyone could please take their seats, please. We're going to resume with our skeleton crew. All right, next on the agenda is item 14.
Item 14 is SP 574, an application for a special permit located at 2125 Northwest 23rd Street. This would be for the drinking establishment use.
Okay. All right, please give us your name and address and tell us about your project, please.
Northwest 23rd Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, zip code is 73107. And this application was put in as it was determined that I have to apply for a special permit to add alcohol to my establishment. I did apply for, first and foremost, I would like to tell a little bit about my business. It is a place where I established for people to, a cultural hub for individuals from diverse backgrounds that can come to and experience different cultures and cuisines. As it stands right now, I do serve food and hookah, and I plan on adding, I wanted to add liquor to my establishment. However, as it was determined by the zoning department, I needed to apply for a special permit, which I proceeded to apply for. For today, I believe that the addition of alcoholic beverages to my menu would enhance the overall experience of my customers and complement the flavors of international cuisines and provide an opportunity for the patrons to indulge in cultural-inspired cocktails and also enjoy a glass of wine with their meals. In closing, I kindly request for a favorable consideration of my application for special permit to include alcohol to my operations at this time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Powers, this is your ward. Do you want to lead the discussion?
Well, will you say your name for me again, please?
It's Emmanuel Pogue. The last name is, the K in the last name is silent.
Ah, okay.
The K, yes.
Okay, thank you. When I called him this morning, I didn't even dare try. I really, unless there's somebody here who wants to speak on this item, I really don't have a whole lot to say about it. It sounds like an interesting concept. And, you know, a giant abandoned shopping center seems like the ideal place. But anything, you do have HP to the north of you, and as you and I discussed, there won't be any outdoor activities associated with this business.
That is correct.
So I'm not feeling the need to impose any specific hours of operation or anything like that. I'm not going to argue with you about whether you need a special permit or not. I mean, generally a restaurant that serves alcohol does not, but that has to do with how much of your sales and, you know, all that kind of stuff. If they've told you you do, then, you know, that's fine with me. And if nobody else wants to speak on this matter or has any other questions, I'll move approval.
I don't have anyone signed up to speak.
I'll move approval.
Commissioner Powers has moved approval of item SP 574. Recommendation of approval, City Council. Do we have a second? It's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes when available. And that item passes. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Takes us to item 15.
Item 15 is SP 575, which is another special permit application for the same purpose of drinking establishment located at 2401 Shaw Avenue, Suite B.
Is the applicant present? Good afternoon.
I'm kind of nervous because never got an opportunity to speak in front of that many people.
That's all right. Just start with your name and address, and then tell us about your project.
My name is Mohsin Butt, and don't laugh at my last name, please, because this is not my fault. The same case that the previous gentleman, described. Initially, my idea was just to begin with the hookah and sports lounge, but my manager actually suggested to go for the daiquiri and other stuff. So, I mean, That's all I can say, I just came here for your approval, to commissioners.
This is Commissioner Pennington's ward, and he has left. Does any other commissioners have any comments or questions?
I don't have any particular sticking point, but I was just kind of curious if maybe you tell us a little more about your concept. It looks like an old gas station.
We are not actually making any food inside, but I'm actually planning to get a food cart outside because we have a huge parking lot. So yes, we can provide food prepared outside, whoever wants to eat it. And then I'm gonna, also provide them 2 or 3 pool tables and the hookah, that's it. With all those, TVs available to watch the games going on.
I think normally those activities, we would tend to be a little concerned with those, but because of the unique nature of this site there, it's on the hard corner, bordered by 235. There's no nearby residential that's too close. I don't have any issues with it.
No,
So.
good luck with the business.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we're ready for a motion.
Well, Kamal's not here, so I'll move to recommend approval of SP 575.
A motion recommending approval to City Council of SP 575 by Commissioner Govine. Do I have a second? It's been seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes when available. And that passes. Good luck.
So much, guys. Thank you.
Item 6.
Great.
Item 16 has been continued. Takes us to item 17.
Item 17 is SPUD 1539, an application to rezone 234 Southeast 45th Street from R1 to Spud 1539.
Robert Haggard, P.O. Box 21126, OKC, okay. I'm here to answer any questions.
This is Ward 4, and we are missing our Ward 4 commissioner. Commissioner Powers, would you like to lead the discussion?
I'm sorry, I think I've lost my place. Where are we?
Item 17.
For some reason, I may have disposed of item 17. Sorry, excuse me. Yes.
If I might, while she's looking for that, you previously saw this site as a PC case and recommended that it come back as an SPUD, and so he's returned today.
Oh.
Well, so, okay. It's always difficult when you're talking about R1 to an industrial use. We're talking about here. I'm sorry. I guess I'm just too disorganized to address this.
So there's one technical evaluation, and that is, are you in agreement with that? Are you aware of the technical evaluation?
Yes.
Okay, and you're in agreement with that?
Yes. The
That's related.
freestanding sign and the landscape buffer on the south side?
Actually, the technical evaluation is that if the existing building is removed or demolished, new development will require screening and landscaping per the landscape code.
I'm sorry, but
The technical evaluation is that if you should you demolish the existing building, that any new development, new building that you construct will require screening and landscaping for the site per the land use code.
yeah, but we're not going to demolish the building. And we agreed to the landscape buffer on the south side and the one freestanding sign.
And you're not going to, but the next owner might, and that's what we have to do. You have zero setbacks for the rear, 0 setbacks on the side. there's residential around you. It's, to me, there's questions still to be determined on this.
Number one of which would probably be, do you really need I-2? Can you do what you need to do inside the building?
Well, this was we applied for a permit and inadvertently applied under I, which you've seen in all the allowance, all the things that are allowed under I, there's like 45 or 50 different things. And so you guys recommended that we do a continuance and review the situation, and so we decided to go for a SPUD. And we reduced the entire allowed activities in this building down to 8350.7, just one out of all the 50 different things, which is moderate industrial. And what they're going to do is, you drive around and see construction sites, residential or commercial, with those little black plastic fences around them.
Silk fence?
Silk
Drainage.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to make. They're going to make that kind of a product, and as well as other construction aid products inside the building.
So,
And they won't be storing any of that finished product outside?
No.
Okay.
It has a beautiful, brand new, it's been very well maintained. It looks new. There's a 12-foot fence around the whole thing in perfect repair. And so it was suggested to go for the SPUD in order to, you guys were just worried about the unlimited things that could be done there, and we limited it way down to.
And we've addressed that by eliminating only one use, yeah.
unfortunately, the one use, moderate industrial, is not very descriptive. I see Sarah frantically looking through her use units there. If we can limit the uses on the property to inside the building, then we could limit the base zoning district to I-1, I would think, rather than I-2. But just in terms of the bulk standards and so on. But I'm curious about what uses are allowed under moderate industrial. It's not a very descriptive title.
Well, moderate industrial is the actual use unit, and I'm assuming they need that for the manufacturing piece. That's how you get to that.
Okay.
It's just, our code book just says it's establishments engaged in manufacturing, assembly, fabrication, packaging, or other industrial processing of products, primarily from extracted or raw materials. So I think you need the moderate industrial for the manufacturing piece, correct?
Okay.
I think the commission's concern is how much of that is done outdoors.
None.
And whether you can limit the manufacturing activity to indoors.
No, there isn't any outside.
Well, then can we add a TE that says all manufacturing activities to be limited to indoors?
Well, and I think we should introduce
And storage.
the base zoning district like I-1. Assuming that modern industrial is allowed in I-1, it doesn't matter where it would be in SVD.
That's what I understood was that the I-1 won't allow the manufacturing.
Right, the I-1 allows light industrial, and you need I-2 to get the moderate industrial.
Okay, all right. Well then, yeah, I think the addition of the TE, just to require that, and you say you don't need storage, outdoor storage.
Pardon?
You say you don't need outdoor storage?
Well, there would be a time when there would be deliveries in that fenced area.
Sir, please, if you can, speak at the mic so that we can get it on the,
Hard for me to hear is the problem.
I understand.
So, I'm sure there's going to be times when there will be deliveries, and then they'll take that inside and manufacture whatever they're going to manufacture, such as that kind of product for construction.
I don't think we'd consider that outdoor storage, though. No. So, I think the addition of TE to indicate that the activity is on site, so that would be TE2, would be all indoors. And maybe a separate one for the outdoor storage.
I would suggest a site-proof fence. It's suggested to
A site-proof fence?
yeah, that site-proof screening will not be required, item 6, and so I think you should change it to,
So are you saying to put a site-proof fence on that south side?
yeah, because you're going to be storing materials to manufacture in the lot and with the residential around it.
I don't,
Yeah, what was it?
So will you be storing materials in the lot outside?
Shouldn't need any.
Fabric, the stakes, the other materials for it?
No, I mean, they're.
And what about after it's built? The
They're making it
materials would-
inside, taking it from putting it on a forklift, putting it on a trailer, shipping it
So
out.
you store no materials outside?
They're not selling to the public or anything of that nature. They're building it there and shipping it out. So there's no storage or anything like that. It's not necessary. They have 4 stories of shelves in the building for storing and anything of that nature, but no customers or anything come to the lot to pick anything up, I guess.
Sir, can I have your name and address just for our records?
Yeah, sorry, it's Josh, 208 South Riverside Drive, Moore.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, my thoughts is that the TEs, whether it's one TE with both manufacturing and storage is limited to indoors, covers this, because that sticks with the SPUD, no matter who owns the property. And currently, you have a situation with whatever fence you have, which is not site-proof. The first TE says if the existing building is removed or demolished, new development will require screening and landscaping per code. So it can't be made any different than it currently is unless they tear the building down, and then it would have to comply with everything.
I think I would feel better if it were screened to the south, where it is absolutely abutting that residential.
Well, sure, yeah, I mean, but I'm seeing a 10-foot buffer on the plat, on this Exhibit B, but which is fine, I'm not disagreeing with you, I just, for clarity, the current situation is a 12-foot chain link fence there, is that right?
The fence to the south that you're referring to coming off the end of the building, going to the next property, is screened. It's metal panels to keep anybody from walking in and out. So you cannot see through it. If that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, well, I think, and Commissioner Powers is specifically talking about that, so let's be very clear on the presentation. Can we see the mouse? If, from city staff? Yeah, can you run the mouse on the south of that building?
So there is a fence that was put in from the edge of this, because the edge, from the edge of this building to here, and that is, those are 10-foot metal panels all the way across. So it's not visible, or you can't walk through it or anything. And then the one here to the west is also metal panels shielding the property to the west side. So,
So we're not requiring anything they can't comply with, but it will require whoever owns property in future not to take those panels down, so.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, we got there.
All right, are we ready for a motion?
I think so. I'll move for approval, item number 17, SPUD 1539, with the addition of, subject to TE number 1, with the addition of TE 2, that all activities on site will take place indoors within the building.
Manufacturing activities? Manufacturing activities?
Manufacturing activities. That's good, thank you. TE 3, no outdoor storage of materials or goods on site. And TE 4, site-proof screening on the south and west property lines.
Sure. All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Powers with the amended TEs. Do I have a second?
Oh, sorry, that's me.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Meek. Please cast your votes when available. That item passes.
thank you, guys.
Good luck with your project. That takes us to item 18.
Item 18 is SPUD 1542, an application to rezone 7500 South Council Road from the AA District to SPUD 1532.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. The application before you is an SPUD at Southwest 74th and Council. As you're all familiar with this area and the growth we've seen, the Highway 152 connection to the Turnpike has been significant. The airport is just to the east, And you can kind of see at the very top left corner of the screen that there is a rail line that goes through there. So to our west is straight I-2, to the south and west is I-2. What we propose is a spud with an I-2 base. We've broken it into 2 tracks. Tract 1 would be I-1 with a few added uses. Tract 2, excuse me, have it upside down, there we go. The southern tract would be I-1, and we require site-proof screening. There are 2 TEs, both of which we agree to. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Meek, this is your ward.
Yes, I do have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
This is my first day, so bear with me. Let me do the
Microphone, there you go. All right, on track 1, it has some increased activities for the use type, but the drawing is where I have the question. What type of, the hatching looks like it has a main entry, possibly concrete, with 1, 2, I can't even really tell if it's 2 or 3 spaces. So I have a concern regarding tract 1 meeting minimum parking requirements for that size of a building. And then I'm not sure what the, what type of hard surface that hatching is describing, whether it be gravel or concrete, but it's different than the driveway.
So in terms of parking, we don't seek to reduce the number of required spots. The SPUD under Section 6 does require that we meet Chapter 59's parking requirements. So whatever our use is at permitting, that will dictate the number of spots that we have to have.
Okay.
In terms of, I'm not aware that we're doing anything other than, we don't seek to make any amendments to anything that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So
that was my main concern, that
Yeah.
we weren't trying to dumb down the permit requirements.
No, we don't seek to vary it. So whatever, code would require us to do is what we'll.
More. Okay, so as far as wastewater commercial development will require extension of the sanitary sewer. Had one more note. Give me 1 second. Okay, that's it for me. I don't have any questions unless anybody else has questions regarding this. I move to approve.
All right, we have anyone else speak? Nope. All right, so we have a motion. Yeah, I don't have anyone signed up. So we have a motion from Commissioner Meek to approve.
With the TEs.
Subject to the technical evaluations, recommend approval of City Council of item SPUD 1542. We have a second.
I'm stuck on move.
We're having trouble with our screen here. Computer.
I've got it on computer.
Refresh.
There we got
Oh,
it.
there you go. Move. Second. No,
It's
you
been
did
seconded by
good.
Commissioner Powers. Please cast your votes. That passes.
Thank you.
Item 19 was continued. That takes us to item 20.
Item 20 is PC 10891, an application to rezone 1821 North MacArthur Boulevard from the R4 district to C3.
I'm Terry Moore, and I'm here representing Marcella Alvarez, and we're asking that this be rezoned to commercial. We own all the property in front of it. We're looking to do upgrades of some storage buildings, a grocery store, but we need this property that's behind all this in front to be zoned commercial so we can use it as shared parking. And it was approved by the staff.
Okay. Commissioner Powers, this is your ward.
Mr. Moore and I spoke briefly this morning. I honestly have some significant reservations about straight zoning on this property. The number of uses allowed by C3 is pretty wide and can be pretty difficult to make compatible with residential development, which they have on their southwest corner I believe the staff report tells us they're 80 feet away from the residential property to the north, and that is a considerable distance. But by combining the two tracks, they make it eligible for an awful lot of things that could be pretty intrusive. There is a city park next door to this property, to the west of this property. And I really would just prefer to see it rezoned into an SPUD that would, I assume it would be an SPUD. How many acres are we talking about here? That would, permit some control over the types of uses that would be allowed, and perhaps, given that they're going to combine it with the tract in front, would be able to provide a better ingress and egress plan for the development of the property. So that's me.
Anyone else feel?
Anybody else have any thoughts they'd
Similar?
like to share?
I like the idea of a grocery store, but as you say, that could be any number of things in a straight C3. And yeah, I can't disagree.
I printed off my usual list of C3 uses, and it's quite extensive, and some of them are pretty impactful. So, have you given any thought to the idea of rezoning the property through a simplified planned unit development? And I keep saying that. Would it be a PUD? Do we know how big the tract to the east is? Oh, well, it's just this tract, so.
2.5 acres.
This one's 2.5, but they own
the 2.5 to the east.
at least.
Yeah. Have you thought about doing that, about rezoning the property through
it
a
was approved by
simplified?
the staff, so we didn't consider anything. I mean, the staff, when they say that they feel like it meets with the city going forward, we didn't argue that we needed to change it to something different.
That was very kind of them, but unfortunately, it is our decision to make, and I'm just not comfortable with straight zoning on this property. I'm just not. I think it needs to be put into a simplified plan unit development where there's some provisions made for how it's going to be developed, what it's going to be used for. As it sits, it could be an on-queue, and I just don't think this is an appropriate location for something like that.
I mean, especially with the proximity, it's right next door to a park, so you've got little ones running around. So we need to make sure that we can secure the perimeter and access to the site. So I would be in agreement, want to see it as a SPUD.
So what are you wanting us to actually submit and do? I mean, the front of it is all commercial, and we own that front. And we're just trying to make this where we can combine it all and build things there. We have a dilapidated building that we've been waiting on in order to start renovating so that we can use that assured parking, that this has to be zoned.
Well, if this is the piece you're wanting to use for parking, you could, seek O2 zoning on it. But if you're wanting to use it for a commercial use, I think we need to see the plan that you have for that. And staff will be more than happy to help you construct an SPUD. I say that so confidently. Is it true? A master design statement. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate.
Well, like I said, the reason we didn't go a whole lot into depth and draw up plans and submit, because that's going to cost money, we were trying to get it approved first. So each one of these building that we're going to put up there has to be approved by the building.
Well, your application fee for the zoning case that you brought will be applied to your simplified planned unit development, so you won't have lost any money there. But
Yeah, you got to pay to have stuff drawn up to submit to the city. I can't just draw, if what you're asking for is going to cost for an engineer to draw up what we're putting on each lot.
Your exhibit for a planned unit a simplified planned unit development does not have to be elaborate.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be drawn by an architect.
Okay. But that was never brought up to us. That's the reason we didn't do that.
Yes, that's a possibility too. C1 would be, I mean, are you asking me if I would be more comfortable with it as a base, as a straight zoning?
Well, as from staff's perspective, and trying to make sure we don't put you in a situation that you can't do what you want to do, but that the Planning Commission is comfortable with. We have a C1 district, that's commercial district. It's more neighborhood related. It does allow food and beverage sales, so it allows a grocery store. It would allow a parking lot. It does not allow straight up retail. It allows convenience sales and personal services limited to 10,000 square feet buildings, and it's just, it doesn't allow large gas stations. It doesn't allow drive-throughs. It's a district that's intended to be located closer to neighborhoods.
Okay.
But I don't know if the commission would be comfortable with that. That is an amendment you can make to this application, or if they would still prefer a SPUD for some of the other items that they mentioned about the park and buffering.
Well, that back park or whatever, we would fence that. We wouldn't want anything against that park.
Well, I suggest, let's do this. Let's continue this case for 2 weeks. And you and I can visit more about what might be workable for you. We did talk about the possibility of a lesser intense commercial zoning district than C3. But, and it may be that we can get where we need to go without having to do an SPUD, which would require renotice and all that sort of thing. So let's continue the case for 2 weeks.
Okay.
You and I will talk more.
Sure.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
We need a motion.
in that event, I will move item number 20, PC 10891, to be continued for 2 weeks, until our next meeting.
I have a motion from Commissioner Powers to continue the item to the July 27th meeting. It's been seconded by Commissioner Noble. Please cast your votes. That item is continued. All the remaining items to be heard on the agenda have been continued. It takes us to item 5, additional items. Communications reports, Planning Commission committees. I see nothing. Planning Commission members. Nothing.
I'm sorry.
Planning Commission members, individual comments.
Welcome to our newest member. We're so glad he's here. It's going to be wonderful to have somebody with that firefighting experience to give us advice on some of the thorny things that we deal with from time to time.
I can't wait for the first TE for fire suppression.
Yeah.
Individuals fire suppression in residential. Be a lively discussion. Anyone else? Planning Department?
We were planning on having a study session on the 27th at the next meeting, and I just wanted to remind you and ask if you can attend. It's on a relevant topic. It's planned to be related to the septic density lot size issue.
I don't believe.
Our next meeting, you said, on the 27th?
27th. We will send the agenda out when it's official, but we normally hold those around 11 before the regular meeting. So if you just, I guess just let me know if you can't attend. That'll help me understand how many can attend.
Municipal Counselor's Office? Citizens to be heard? Anyone? No other business?
Do we have one?
We do have one? All right. Please come to the microphone and give us your name and address.
Tom Bott with 1121 Northwest 11th Street, and this is for Spud 1492. I wanted to confirm that it was on the docket for 7/27 in 2 weeks. It's been deferred like two times. And it's hard to find the agenda online.
It's not available yet. It won't be published until Friday before. At that time, I guess we'll be able to confirm if it'll be on that agenda or
I'm
not.
so sorry, Spud 1492.
1492. Columbus.
Okay. Can we confirm that? Off the top of my head, I don't recall which one that is and who the applicant is.
It's Dranick Properties, Mr. Kennard, spelled backwards. That's, it began in February, delayed to March, delayed to May, and then the agenda report online, I don't know if it's a computer issue with me, but on my Chromebook, it's like I don't have the permissions to download it. It's hard for me to just determine when this meeting is supposed to take place. And I also have these petitions from our neighborhood. We want to reject the SPUD proposal. They want to upzone from R3 to R4, and I have a degree in architecture from OU, and I've studied the planning, and there's really not room to even satisfy the basic zoning requirements at R4 on this small lot for this very large building.
What's the address of that property?
Well, it's on the 1100 block of Northwest 11th. It's
Okay.
Spud 1492.
Yes, I recall that one. We'll have to
And
check on the status of it.
I was wondering if there's a new staff report, like there's been more developments, because it's been 6 months. And I also noticed that the owner has acquired another property in the next block. There's not room for to do what he wants to do. I think he probably wants to put parking over there. I mean, just in order to, as a reasonable citizen, protect my neighborhood, I like to know what's going on, prepare for it, and I'm prepared to make some remarks.
Understand. So that's an item that hasn't been on the agenda, hasn't been slated for an agenda yet. It keeps getting deferred, and so
My staff is confirming it is on the agenda for July 27th. However, I don't know the status of it. So if the applicant isn't, we have to hear from the applicant whether it's ready to be heard. So we'll have to follow up if that's okay with you. We can get your email address and.
Yeah, that would be great. It's just like, I'd rather have it be resolved than it just keeps getting delayed, which is really better than them building it, but it's not as good as it being.
We'll put you in contact both with staff and with the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
thank you for coming down.
Time to sit.
That takes us to the end of the agenda. So with that, I motion us adjourned for Commissioner Pennington.